column of Russian assault troops in buggies was destroyed by Ukrainian artillery. The occupiers tried to attack the defenders in the Pokrovsk direction. As a result of a devastating strike from several artillery systems, the offensive was thwarted. The enemy suffered losses in both personnel and equipment. Smart move. Got him. Finish him off. The Pokrovsk direction remains one of the hottest spots. Since the start of the day, Ukrainian soldiers from the armed forces have successfully repelled nearly a third of all recorded Russian attacks on the significant section of the front line in total.
The Russians' goal is obvious. That's why they're definitely in a hurry, and it's really clear they're rushing to carry out the orders coming from the Kremlin. The orders, let's put it this way, are obvious. For now, the main objective is to seize as much territory as possible, at least in the Donetsk region, so that the bunker Führer can periodically announce to the whole world about imaginary victories, about the Valdai massacre, complain to everyone that he's advancing but being wronged, yet still insists he's ready to keep fighting. But today, the defense forces are doing everything they can to completely neutralize such ideas and plans of the enemy.
The armed forces of Ukraine refute the false claims of Russian propaganda about allegedly capturing settlements in the Pokrovsk sector of the front and continue to hold the line of defense. The military is showing that the Ukrainian flag is raised in Pokrovsk, Mirnograd, Grishino, and also in the city of Rodinske in the Donetsk region.
Russian soldiers who managed to slip into Rodinske are immediately detected and destroyed by all available means. Combat operations are being carried out around the clock. Russia uses lies as a weapon, just like guns and missiles. Our mission is to confront the enemy on every front of the war they have unleashed. From the report of the 1st Corps of the National Guard of Ukraine, Azov, Telegraph.
Military experts also note that the remarkable resilience of Ukrainian soldiers is significant and emphasize that, in fact, many surprises still await the Russian occupiers.
A surprise for the Russians, a surprise. In the Pokrovsk direction, north of Pokrovsk, when that Dobropilsk salient was eliminated. The same thing. That's why our command is solving a dual task here. First, to wear down the enemy, to break their offensive potential. Second, to preserve our forces for a mobile defense.
The drone forces carried out a brilliant operation in two directions at once, Huliaipol and Orikiv. There, in just 1 hour, Ukrainian soldiers destroyed 2 Russian surface-to-air missile systems, a book and a Tor, at the same time. That's a loss of more than $50 million. The fighters note that destroying the enemy's expensive equipment has already become a systematic part of the combat work of Ukraine's defense forces. In total, over the past day, according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Ukrainian defenders destroyed 4 Russian tanks and the same number of armored combat vehicles, as well as 33 artillery systems and 553 UAVs, and eliminated another 1,000 Russian soldiers. Thus, Russian losses during the full-scale war have already reached 1 million and almost 208,000 soldiers.
Serhiy Porachuk, spokesman for the Ukrainian Volunteer Army, is with us. Sergei, hello.
Welcome. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the defense forces. Greetings to you.
Serhiy, we can see that even on New Year's Eve, the number isn't going down. The destroyed occupiers can't sit still, and they probably don't feel like celebrating either. How do you assess the situation? Where is the most difficult situation on the front right now?
I don't quite agree that the occupiers won't celebrate. It's just that they celebrate in their own Russian way. That is, it's terror. It's shelling of our territories, and accordingly, it's carrying out offensive actions on one or another section of the front. As for their activity, it might drop a little, but the intensity of the fighting will still be just as high as it has been in all these previous days. Accordingly, the hottest areas of the front will remain just as intense. Indeed, we're talking about the Pokrovsk and Mirnograd agglomeration being the #1 target today. Obviously, the bunker Führer really wanted to report not only the occupation of Kupiansk, but also to say that the city of Pokrovsk had been captured by the Russian occupiers. However, it's clear that neither the first nor the second will happen. It simply won't happen. And today, despite such heavy pressure, the Russians still lack the strength and tactical means to force our defenders to retreat from their prepared positions, even those positions being destroyed by Russian aviation. However, what we're saying is that the defense is holding very firmly thanks to the forces and efforts involved. The 7th Rapid Response Corps of the Ukrainian Air Assault Forces. We're saying that all locations along the front, despite the difficulty of the situation, particularly in the Lyman direction and the Huliapol direction, our fighters are still engaged in fierce battles with the Russian occupiers, destroying, as you rightly pointed out, a large number of aggressors. And in fact, the losses that the Russians are suffering today are quite likely, I think in the near future this will become evident, quite likely. They can't, let's put it this way, not only increase the grouping of Russian troops on the territory of Ukraine, but God willing, it's quite likely that next year we'll even see a reduction in this grouping, because it's clear that the resources the occupiers have today are not enough to replenish their losses and continue combat operations at the same level of intensity, given the losses the Russians are suffering. We see that today very widely. Mechanized equipment is being used in various directions. That's why the intensity will be high, because the Russians' objectives are obvious. So they will be in a hurry, and it's clear that they're rushing to carry out the orders coming from the Kremlin. The orders are obvious. For now, the main goal is to seize as much territory as possible, at least in the Donetsk region, which the bunker Führer must periodically announce to the whole world about imaginary victories, about the Valdai massacre, and complain to everyone that supposedly he's advancing but being wronged. But still, he's ready to keep fighting. Well, today, the defense forces are doing everything they can to completely neutralize such ideas and plans of the enemy.
Siri, look, summing up the year is, in my opinion, a bit of an overused genre. But one way or another, I'd like to ask you for your opinion. Let's do it this way. I'll even name it. It's not just the increased cases of long-range deep strikes by Ukraine against legitimate targets on the territory of the Russian Federation, but overall, on a daily basis, we are recording that this is happening. But first, a bit of information on this topic. From the latest, as they say. The Security Service of Ukraine struck a major Rosreserve oil depot in the Yaroslav region. According to sources, long-range drones from the Alpha Special Operations Center struck the Tem oil depot in the city of Rybinsk, an important logistics hub and a key element in the storage and distribution of petroleum products in the northeastern region of Russia. The Security Service of Ukraine emphasizes that operations to cut off fuel supply chains for the Russian army will continue in the future. So, Serhiy, in your opinion, how do you see this? Maybe it's an interim result, but still. What has Ukraine managed to achieve this year in terms of strikes? Specifically, these long-range targets.
To me, it's like a web. One of the most striking events.
One of them, yes, is the Security Service of Ukraine. But let's put it this way, as for the end of this year, honestly, during wartime, I don't want to sum up the results of any particular year, because the war is ongoing. We have interim stages, today is just one of them, but still. Let's put it this way, by the end of this year, we see this kind of system, well, maybe not even a system, but something like a blackout response in the Moscow region of Russia. In particular, look, every day some city there drops out of the so-called electric jets. And today we know that near Domodedovo, for example, a city has lost power. We don't know what's happening, but let's just say, it's obvious that these are some unpleasant things for Russians. Maybe a bit later we'll say who is behind these blackouts. Accordingly, if we're talking about our strikes, then the year 25 has definitely become the year. We don't have a strategy for systematic strikes because we remember. It started on January 25th, when the first operations on the territory of the Russian Federation began. Systematic, planned operations. And by the end of 2025, we find ourselves in a situation where, from our, let's say, favorable point of view, in the restaurant of military operations, we're basically ordering a menu for the defense forces. We need to hit this particular element of the Russian military-industrial complex, or the oil refining sector. Accordingly, we see that our strategy is now aimed not only at oil refineries, as it was until recently. Today, it targets critical enterprises of the very same Russian military-industrial complex. Today, it means destroying Russian combat aviation. Well, you could probably compare this to the destruction of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, because it's obvious that today we have... No, we probably don't have that classic global navy, those naval forces that, as a maritime nation, we should be able to rely on. But nevertheless, during the war, it is precisely in the Black Sea that our naval and defense forces are showing that the Russian Federation's Black Sea Fleet is steadily sinking to the bottom. You see, our security service of Ukraine is carrying out similar actions. Absolutely right, Operation Web, but that's probably, at the very least, a future Hollywood movie script. That's why it's clear that this systematic approach to strikes has marked the year 2025. I think the list of those enterprises, those key elements of the Russian Federation's economy that will be targeted, will only grow, and it really is critical for the economy of the Russian Federation. And as they say, for dessert, there's the blackout too, alright? I think that strikes on the Russian energy sector are already becoming systematic. It's not just something that happened today by chance. No, this is a well-thought-out operation. In particular, including on the temporarily occupied Ukrainian territories. Here, we're actually talking about UAVs that are being destroyed, which then aren't launched at our territory. And in fact, they've reached as far as the Caspian Sea. Well, it's obvious that there have been quite a few successes. It always seems to us like it's not enough, but there really will be more of them.
Still, I would like to, and I understand that somewhere there's a similar question about summing up the year. So, what awaits us in 2026? What does the Kremlin want? What goals are they setting? For themselves, probably. Well, we need to take that into account too. At the very least, it's already known that the Kremlin is tightening the conscription system and calling up reservists in the face of heavy losses in the war against Ukraine. These steps point to Russia's growing problems with army personnel, according to the American Institute for the Study of War. Analysts remind us that recently, Putin signed a decree allowing active reservists to be sent to special training camps, supposedly to protect critical infrastructure, starting in 2026. At the same time, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, Alexander Syrsky, stated that Russia has fulfilled its recruitment plan for 2025, bringing in about 406,000 people. But the total losses of Russian troops during this period exceeded 410,000 people. Thus, the Institute for the Study of War notes the critical ineffectiveness of the Russian Federation's offensive actions. Nevertheless, Putin gives the order, I think you saw it 2 days ago, for Russian troops to continue the occupation of the Zaporizhia region and to advance on the city of Zaporizhia. And how would you assess? With what? With whom? Okay. How does Putin plan to advance?
Well, actually, there are some questions. I've already pointed out that the Russian grouping is definitely not increasing. Today, due to the heavy losses inflicted by the defense forces. With whom, with what, and how is Putin going to enhance? You know, the enemy's plans are well known to Ukraine's defense forces, which is why the countermeasures today are very effective. Even though the enemy really does keep moving forward, the losses they suffer are completely disproportionate to their gains. Whether you look at it in percentage terms or other figures, it's clear how much the Russians are spending on this war. And this war will still become critical for their economy. That's obvious as of today. The main thing is that in 2026, we must not allow a collapse or a breakthrough of the front. And probably the wish for each of us is not to whine, not to cry, not to fall into a pit of despair, because we really need to understand. We have to hold out for at least one more day, longer, so that all of us can live to see that very victorious peace every Ukrainian dreams of. Obviously, innovation and technology are our main weapons. Actually, no, that's probably the second item on the agenda. The most important thing is our people. So all honor and praise to each of our brothers in arms, to our defenders who are protecting our country with weapons in hand today. And obviously, Ukrainian society, well again, I'll probably say some pretty ordinary cliched words here, needs to show unity. Unity that helped us in 2022, well, actually since 2014, and continues to help us, and will help us in 2026 as well. This year won't be easy. I'm not going to pretend to be an oracle or a psychic or Nostradamus here either. Well, what new can I say? What can I add? Will it be easy? No, it won't be. However, the fact that it will bring us closer to peace, to our just peace, I think that's absolutely certain. And 2025, despite how difficult it is, has already shown us that today.
Serhiy, so tell me, what do you think, without sugarcoating things? Because the enemy is strong, and I definitely don't encourage anyone to underestimate what the Russian army is capable of, and in general, the Russian Federation as a state. But in your opinion, will the year be easy for Russia itself?
Actually, at this point, all we can do is offer our wishes. When the bunker dweller says that first they'll, if you'll allow me, I'll even demonstrate, advance to the north, then they'll advance to the south, we can say to him, as well as to the entire Russian Federation, you really will be heading south.
In Ukrainian, that sounds a little different, but still.
It's a tough year, and we're talking about it. We have a whole lot that we need. We have to do and overcome so that we can stand firm and endure. Will it be easy? It will be very difficult for them too. That's probably why they're in such a hurry. And today it's obvious they're really rushing. Just look, they've started launching frontal assaults again. And for a good life, I don't think so. That's why I wish everyone, once again, unity, courage, and resilience to withstand this struggle when our anti-tank units are being hit hard and the front is tough. But still, I'm sure that we'll be able to talk about all this in 2026. Together with you, we'll be able to tell, explain, analyze, and support each one of us.
Absolutely, Serhiy. Thank you very much for the conversation. Thank you for joining our discussion. You know, no matter what, we still say goodbye to every speaker. We wish, let's say, that 2026 will be better than perhaps 2025 was. Yes, I understand that everyone has their own tasks right now during this season, whether it's before New Year's or Christmas. But still, thank you, Serhiy, for what you do for all of us and for Ukraine. And also to your brothers in arms and sisters. Happy belated holiday.
The next hour, I'll pass all of this along at the combat positions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. See ya.